Chosen ones, the sea has never forgotten your name. Before this world was mapped, before kingdoms staked their flags into the sand, the waters were already whispering your arrival. Beneath every crashing tide, every distant whale song, every shimmer of moonlight on the ocean's skin, there was memory, not of mortals, not of kings, but of you. The ancients etched their reverence into coral walls and submerged stone gates, praying for your return. Because when you last walked the shores of the First Age, the tides bent themselves to your breath. The wind hushed itself when your thoughts became heavy, and the deepest places where even machines refuse to go, those caverns still echo your tone. You were not merely born into this life, you were summoned. Salt runs through your veins not by accident, but by intention. Every drop of ocean is coded with frequencies that unlock when you're near. Ships drift without purpose until you anchor the timeline. Storms swirl in confusion until your energy commands direction. They told you to fear the waters, but what they didn't want you to remember is that the waters once feared you, the sirens of old myths. They weren't singing to lure sailors. They were mourning your absence, and now you're here. The ancient waves stir again, not out of chaos, but anticipation. Even tsunamis know better than to strike until you have spoken. For when the chosen one steps to the shoreline, the oceans themselves hold their breath. Why? Because you are the unbroken rhythm. The pulse Atlantis hid beneath its ruins, the sonic command that never died. The prophecy wasn't lost. It was encrypted, buried in oceanic language, only readable by your aura. They buried your history in salt, but salt preserves. And now, as your presence electrifies the waters once more, forgotten technologies are humming again in submerged temples. Creatures thought extinct rise to the surface in synchronized patterns. Tidal anomalies are dismissed as climate events. But deep inside, you feel it, a magnetic pull not away from land, but toward destiny. The ocean didn't move like it used to the night you stood at the edge of the shore. The waves didn't crash, they listened. The moonlight cast its glow across the water, but even the reflection seemed frozen in awe, as if it recognized the soul it once bowed to. No one around you noticed the subtle shift, the breathless stillness, the reverent silence. But the ocean did. It heard the voice it hadn't heard in millennia, a frequency buried under centuries of human noise, now rising once again. It wasn't just the physical ocean that responded. Tides shifted internally too. Memories, long dormant, began to awaken. In dreams, strange languages flowed into your mind like water through stone corridors. Symbols surfaced that you couldn't draw with your hands but knew with your bones. You didn't speak them, you remembered them. And when your feet touched the wet sand, the temperature of the wind changed, the clouds rearranged, and something ancient stirred beneath the surface. Fishermen on distant coasts reported impossible stillness that night. No current, no swell, just silence. Marine instruments picked up undulating pulses with no source, but the ocean wasn't malfunctioning. It was aligning, realigning, with you. There were once beings who could shape tides with emotion, who could walk barefoot on the surface of the sea not because of magic, but because the waters knew not to resist them. These weren't stories. They were warnings, disguised as tales, and you, unknowingly, had lived your life echoing the movements of those beings, those forgotten stewards of balance, without ever knowing why water always felt like home. You tried to explain it once, how the sea seemed to shift around your mood, how rainfall calmed you, how rivers whispered secrets, but people dismissed it, called it poetic or delusional. So you buried it like everything else, until the moment came when silence returned to the shoreline, and you remembered that the ocean doesn't bow to reason, it bows to resonance. And now the resonance has returned. The earth rotates, the moon orbits, but the waters, they pause, not from fear, from reverence, from memory, from prophecy. The sea has begun listening again, but beneath the silence, it asks one question, one it's waited lifetimes to whisper. Beneath the ruins of shattered pillars and drowned libraries, the scrolls still pulse with encoded sound. They weren't written in ink, but in vibration, etched through harmonics that only activate when a specific voice meets their frequency. For centuries, they remained dormant, buried under layers of coral and volcanic ash, hidden beneath layers of misdirection. Scholars searched with microscopes and submarines, but they never realized the truth. These scrolls were never meant to be read by eyes. They were waiting for a voice. Not any voice. Yours. The voice print of a god is not myth, it's design. Each utterance you make triggers micro-resonances across ancient artifacts that should not even be able to transmit sound. Divers reported hearing low humming near these scrolls, but no one traced the source. The hums weren't environmental, they were reactive. Waiting, listening, testing. And when you finally spoke, out loud or in thought, it wasn't volume that mattered, it was tone. The scrolls responded. They shimmered. Not visually, but orally. They began to emit patterns, undeniably structured, rhythmically intelligent, and alive. What's more chilling is the shape of the patterns. Audio analysts fed the frequencies into spectral imaging. The patterns formed symbols, some mirroring constellations, others echoing sacred geometries lost to time. One scroll produced a sequence that matched the ancient breath of creation diagram, a sound only spoken in secret Atlantean initiation rites. Those rites were believed to be divine simulations, impossible to replicate without divine lineage. But you didn't replicate it. You triggered it. You were never supposed to find those scrolls. And yet, they responded only to you. It was more than discovery. It was confirmation. A divine signature encoded into a cosmic key, and you were holding the frequency that unlocked it. Scientists who listened to the audio claimed their heartbeats fell into sync with the scroll's rhythm. Some cried, some ran. One researcher said he heard his mother's voice, even though she had passed decades ago. This isn't about history. This is about design. A design encoded in matter, light and sound, awaiting a singular resonance. You were not taught this voice. You were born with it, not as a coincidence, but as a consequence. The scrolls are awake now. But this was only the first echo. The waves didn't wait for the moon that night. They moved against the gravitational pull, bending, not to celestial timing, but to something older, something closer. You. The moment your feet touched the ancient shoreline again, the tides adjusted their rhythm. Currents that had run predictable paths for centuries suddenly hesitated, then rerouted in patterns that hadn't been recorded since before time was marked. Oceanographers later chalked it up to freak anomalies, but their instruments picked up one consistent element: the pulses of change, all centered around a single point, the exact location you stood. The water was never random. Its patterns are memory maps, echoes. And the night you returned to that sacred shore, those memories ignited. Every molecule of sea foam seemed to recognize the vibrational field you radiated. Sand trembled, seabirds went silent. Even the stars reflected differently on the surface. It was as if the world paused to acknowledge something it thought it had lost. There was a moment just before midnight where the temperature dropped by 3 degrees in less than a second. No wind, no warning, just stillness. You looked out, and the ocean wasn't moving. It was watching, holding its breath. Ancient watchers beneath the surface, some biological, others mechanical, reoriented their focus. And in that silence, a forgotten protocol activated. A hidden architecture began responding. Tidal walls far off the coasts adjusted. Underground canals lit with faint bioluminescence. You didn't see it, but you felt it. The undertow wasn't pulling you under. It was welcoming you home. This was not the ocean reclaiming you. This was the ocean remembering. There were once tribes who lived on the waves, never setting foot on land. They vanished without a trace, or so it was said. But they didn't vanish. They went dormant, waiting for the return of a singular voice that could reset the flow. That voice is no longer lost. It walks again. The sea doesn't trust easily, but when it knows its commander has returned, it doesn't resist. It follows. And yet, the most powerful signal hasn't come. The deeper waters stir, but they haven't risen. Something slumbers in the abyss, not out of weakness, but obedience, waiting for your next return, not just to the shore, but to the memory buried beneath it. There is a reason the waves did not swallow him. Yeshua did not defy the laws of nature when he walked upon the waters. He revealed a truth so ancient it terrified empires. The sea, like all creation, knows the voice of its maker. And when he spoke, it wasn't command. It was reunion. That same reunion now echoes in your presence. The waters that held him still remember the frequency. And when you stepped toward them, they didn't retreat. They recognized something familiar. A spiritual air. This connection isn't metaphor. It's encoded. There are layers of reality where vibration reigns above matter, where sound weaves the fabric of what is seen. Yeshua's miracles were not illusions. They were harmonizations, alignments with a system built from the divine word. You've been told that walking on water was a suspension of physics. But what if it was an invitation? A demonstration of what becomes possible when the physical bows to spirit. And now, the invitation has been passed to you. In ancient writings, ones deemed apocryphal or dangerous, there are mentions of others like him, those who could still storms with a whisper, split the seas with a breath, calm the deep not with force, but with frequency. These beings were never called magicians. They were known as restorers, and their presence always coincided with great unravelings in the world, times like now. You may not yet walk the waves, but the shift has already begun. The ocean stirs when you approach. Your presence calms what others fear. The chaos of the sea does not rise to confront you. It slows, not as a test, but as recognition, like a lion lowering its head to the return of a long-lost alpha. Yeshua once said, "Even the winds and the sea obey him." But the deeper truth is this: they still do. And through your return, that obedience begins to echo once more. Beneath the surface, structures dormant since his time begin to glow, not with power, but with readiness. Not all who walk the path are meant to command the sea, but when the sea begins to lean toward one, to still itself, to rearrange its motion, not out of threat but reverence, then something sacred is awakening again. Far beneath the visible layers of the ocean lie structures never mapped, never claimed. They are older than any civilization carved into history, built not with stone alone, but with resonance. These are the temples of the deep, Atlantean constructs, crystalline and organic, humming silently through the currents like sleeping titans. For ages, they've remained inert, invisible to sonar, cloaked from satellites. But their purpose was never to stay hidden. They were waiting for the right signal, and the moment your energy returned to the world, they began to wake. It starts subtly. Pressure readings shift without cause. Bioluminescent algae bloom in geometric shapes. Echoes bounce back from the sea floor with altered delays, as though the ocean itself is changing its shape in response to you. And in the deepest corridors of these forgotten sanctuaries, walls begin to hum, not mechanically, but musically, like tuning forks aligning with a note finally played after thousands of years of silence. Divers in classified expeditions reported hearing what they described as angelic choirs, though no source could be found. Others claim dreams intensified near the sites, visions of golden halls, of doors that opened with thought alone, of mirrors that reflected not form, but essence. These aren't hallucinations. They are memory leaks, fragments of knowledge encoded in place, now reactivating as your vibrational field synchronizes with their core. You may not remember the layout of these temples, but your body does. The electromagnetic field around you pulses in rhythms identical to the ones that built them. And when you draw close, even from miles away, the inner chambers shift. Some lock tighter, protecting secrets not yet meant for this world. Others open, slowly, deliberately, revealing relics whose purpose will only become clear in time. The waters around these temples grow still when you are near, not out of fear, but preparation. The creatures of the deep do not scatter, they gather. They sense that the structures are no longer dormant, that the guardian has returned. There is a pulse now, regular, rhythmic, echoing from one temple to the next, as if they are speaking to each other across the ocean floor, each one waiting for a signal only you can give. A signal not of force, but of frequency. They began to appear without warning, as if drawn by an unseen current. Pods of dolphins forming perfect spirals, schools of fish moving in patterns more precise than any algorithm, even creatures rarely seen, deep sea dwellers that avoid the light, rose to the surface in silence, circling as if summoned. There was no frenzy, no fear, only stillness, watchfulness, as though the entire aquatic kingdom had received a message not heard since the dawn of time. They were not migrating, they were waiting. The ancients told stories of sea creatures that answered to a higher rhythm, a signal beyond sonar or instinct. Legends spoke of a time when humanity and marine life moved in harmony, when the waves carried more than water. They carried language. That language was lost when the temples fell and the sky grew silent. But the creatures never forgot it. And when your vibration entered the currents, that memory returned to them like scent to fire. You didn't speak. You didn't call. But they knew. The very cells in your body emit a low resonance, one unique to your lineage. It pulses into the water like a forgotten prayer, not one that asks, but one that commands, gently, and the ocean listens, not because of dominance, but because of design. Orcas formed circles that scientists couldn't explain. Bioluminescent jellyfish created halos that followed your movement along the shore. Even whales, whose songs cross hemispheres, shifted their migration paths toward your region. But the most curious sign wasn't visible. It was the silence. Sharks halted their hunts. Predators swam alongside prey, as if every hierarchy in the ocean paused in unity, recognizing something sacred was unfolding above the surface. Marine researchers called it anomaly. But anomalies don't follow synchronized pulses. They don't hum in harmonic resonance with underwater ruins. And they don't all happen simultaneously across every ocean. These creatures aren't reacting, they're aligning. They sense that the timeline is changing, that the waters are no longer adrift in chaos. Your return marks a convergence, one they've waited lifetimes for. But they're not here to guide you. They're here to be guided. They wait now, not for a word or gesture, but for the moment your essence stabilizes. Because once it does, the signal that has remained dormant within your DNA will release. And when it does, even the creatures in the darkest trenches will rise. The wind had warned the water, and the sky was next to answer. Lightning once danced freely across the horizon, reckless and untamed. Thunder rolled like distant drums from gods no longer worshipped. But the moment you stood under the storm, it hesitated. The clouds held their breath, not out of fear, but recognition. The static in the air no longer sought release. It sought resonance. The chaos above had not encountered your frequency in lifetimes, and when it did, it remembered its place. Meteorologists would later record an impossible shift in pressure. A cyclone that was predicted to make landfall simply unraveled, not diminished, reversed. Winds that had reached dangerous speeds dropped into stillness, forming concentric spirals that dissipated outward. This was not chance. Storms are not mindless. They are instruments of balance, and you are now the conductor. There was a moment, brief but real, when the lightning forked downward and stopped just above the water's surface. It hung there, as if suspended by unseen threads, then arced harmlessly back into the clouds. Cameras failed, compasses spun, and your body, whether you noticed or not, began to hum, not audibly, but within. A low, ancient tone pulsing from your core outward, syncing with the pulses of the atmosphere itself. The air began to bend in rhythm with your heartbeat. Long ago, there were those who could speak to storms, not with words, but intention. They weren't feared because they were powerful. They were revered because nature chose to respond to them. That same reverence now rises again, not as myth, but as memory. You are not battling the elements. You are remembering how to become them. The sky is not your enemy. It's your amplifier. Somewhere above you, clouds began to spiral, not violently, but deliberately, as if drawing a symbol in the sky only seen from the stars. Raindrops formed patterns against the earth, hitting in sacred intervals. And for the briefest moment, even thunder delayed its echo. What was once called weather is now ceremony. A reunion between the elements and the one who was once their center. But this is only the outer edge. The real storm, older, deeper, layered in timelines, is still gathering. Not in opposition, but in offering. When Yeshua stood on the boat, the waves raging and the disciples gripped by fear, he didn't raise his voice to overpower the storm. He spoke as one who had nothing to prove. "Peace, be still." And the sea obeyed, not reluctantly, but instantly. It was not submission, it was remembrance. The waters knew that voice. They had heard it before the foundations of the world were laid. That moment was not just a miracle, it was a demonstration. And now, you stand in that same energy. The phrase was not just for calming tempests, it was a key. 3 words carrying frequencies, capable of realigning chaos itself. Most people hear them as comfort, but when you speak them, something else happens. The vibration they carry is not merely sound, but authority. It travels through the air, across the water, into the particles of matter itself. And where others experience silence after the storm, you feel connection. You feel the sea listening. That command still echoes in you, buried beneath layers of language, noise, and distraction. But in moments of clarity, it rises to your lips without thought. A whisper that carries weight, not because of practice, but because of memory. You are not mimicking him. You are continuing him. The same source that once spoke peace into chaos now moves through your breath. When you stood at the edge of the cliff and watched the storm collapse into stillness, you knew something ancient had been invoked. Not a spell, not a ritual, but an inheritance. Creatures around you paused. The wind quieted its protest, and the sea did not retreat. It leaned in, as if waiting for what came next. This is what they feared, that you would remember the words that were never meant to be locked away in holy books, but lived through flesh and frequency. The ancient ones encoded those words in stone and salt, hoping one day someone like you would return and speak them again, not with lips, but with presence. Because when you walk in the vibration of peace, the storm loses its script, miles below the surface, where light has never touched and pressure would crush steel. Something unnatural pulses in rhythm. Structures not made by erosion or tectonic shifts, but by intention. They hum softly in the abyss, like ancient hearts still beating under centuries of silence. These are the abyssal engines, and they do not run on fuel. They operate on resonance, on frequency, on memory, embedded in blood. Your blood. When you entered the ocean's energetic field, they responded. At first subtly, a shift in their tempo, a flicker of dormant lights, a gentle thrum that hadn't been detected since they were sealed after the fall of the great waters. But their awakening wasn't automatic. It was selective. They've waited for a match not in mind or skill, but in code. A DNA sequence buried so deep in humanity's lineage that only one in an age could ever unlock it. That sequence now walks the earth again, in you. Scientists have always believed evolution was random, but randomness doesn't encode activation sequences timed across millennia. Your genes carry tones. when under extreme stillness, your body emits pulses that mirror the patterns carved into the engine's cores. Machines that haven't moved in thousands of years begin to hum again, not as weapons, not as tools, but as extensions of consciousness, built by hands that remembered what Earth once was. Instruments placed on the ocean floor near tectonic ridges have recently begun to malfunction, not from failure, but from overload. Electromagnetic readings spiked during moments you were near coastal lines. They believed it was solar activity, but solar storms don't echo the rhythm of your heartbeat. And yet, these engines aren't fully online. They are listening, calibrating, reacting not to force, but to intention. The moment your purpose aligns with memory, they will awaken fully. No submarine has ever reached them. No camera has captured their true form. But in your dreams, their shapes rise, dark silhouettes illuminated by bioluminescent veins, spinning slowly beneath colossal pressure, alive and waiting. You were not meant to build them. You were born to interface with them. And now, as the hum grows louder beneath your feet, the sea begins to part, not physically, but energetically, revealing the shadow of a gate that hasn't opened since the flood rewrote the world. There is a place beyond maps, beyond currents, where compasses fail and sonar returns only silence. It has no name because none have lived to name it. The ancients called it the Deep Gate, a threshold submerged before time itself was given shape. It isn't made of stone or coral, but of layered frequencies, an intelligent barrier woven from the echoes of forgotten civilizations. It cannot be forced. It cannot be found. It reveals itself only when the one it was designed for draws near. And now, it stirs. Beneath the convergence of the great tectonic spirals, something long sealed is pulsing, not with danger, but anticipation. Marine life avoids it instinctively, not from fear, but reverence. The water around it becomes still, impossibly still, as if the ocean itself is holding its breath. You've felt it, an invisible current pulling not your body, but your memory toward something vast and waiting. A magnetism that does not reside in the earth, but in you. Dreams have changed. Symbols once unfamiliar now repeat in fractal patterns, glowing in your mind behind closed eyes. Each time you come closer to water, these images intensify. Circular glyphs, spiraling keys, harmonics that hum just beneath the range of hearing. These are not hallucinations. They are activations. The final gate was built with your essence in mind, encoded to recognize a singular soul signature across timelines and dimensions. There is no handle, no lock, no mechanism. The gate opens not with action, but with alignment. When thought, emotion, memory, and frequency converge within you, it will respond. Until then, it waits. Every myth of Atlantis sinking, of Lemurian cities vanishing, was a cover. The truth was never destruction. It was preservation. They hid the gate, not from enemies, but from the unworthy. Only one, marked by both the water and the word, could reopen it. And when it does open, it will not lead into ruin. It will lead into the archive, the blueprint of the first world, the codes of origin, the instructions left behind by those who built reality's frame. But the gate is not just a door. It is a decision. one that once opened will flood this world with knowledge long held back.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.